Вадим, расскажи, как ты начал свой путь и кем ты успел поработать, прежде чем стать мастеринг-инженером?
I'm 55 now 54, I think. 54. So it's already a long story now. I've been doing full-time mastering since 2007. Before that, I was already also mastering, but I still was working in IT as a system administrator. I have a long career in IT. I was about 25. I started working seriously in IT, and slowly, when getting kids, I was going for 5 days working to 4 days to 3 days to 2 days, and then finally made the point from, okay, I can go full-time mastering now. But it's a long story. Of course, I started playing in a rock and roll band when I was 18, high school, getting my first electric guitar. I always was interested in recording, so I started recording our own band. Later, I started working with Porta Studios, to get a multi-track at home. So it was at the time when MIDI came up. Before that there was no MIDI. So I was there at the time when the first Ataris came out, the first MIDI, like the Roland TR-707, Roland synthesizers, samplers. So from slowly recording my own music, and the studios went bigger and bigger, I started offering recording services because I always wanted to record other people also. And I started recording classical music because it was simple. It was with only 2 microphones, a dot recorder. You could go on any location. So I started doing a lot of location recording for classical music. I was so bad in making good great recordings because it's a very difficult job. You have to make a lot of mistakes. You have to do it a lot of time to become better and better. And I keep doing that all the time and recording my own music. We moved to this place, to this house, the room where we are now. But it was still different. There was a wall here, and I was sitting there, and there was here a recording space. Here it was a vocal booth, and so. Again, I started working on my own music, recording bands, doing some classical projects like big pieces from Bach, like Weihnachtsoratorium and big concerts. On one project, you spend about 200 hours. It was making no money at all. I think I was 36 when we moved here. I was still working in IT in a big hospital. I was the system administrator in a big hospital. And after that, I went to another job working in a university. And having my studio, but I always wanted to be more involved in music. Of course, we all got the correct wave plugins. We're doing recordings, and okay, then we found out, we have this L2, so we can make a recording very loud. Of course, we did make CDs for clients, so you had to finish the product. So it was, but so we slowly got into mastering. I bought some special gear for mastering. Like a Focusrite Mixmaster, which was a kind of crazy unit. And then I bought, I bought a TubeTech SMC2B, the big, the 3-unit. And at that time, I was still working in IT about for 3 or 4 days, and I built my own up and download server, which was because we did not have WeTransfer in that time. So I built my own up and download server, which was also a graphical interface. I had a PC there here in the studio, and the internet was just getting very big. All over the world was, England, America, everybody was having internet. So I had this easy up and download service, which was pretty accessible instead of command line FTPs. So, and at that time also I started using Google AdWords, and I was always building my own websites for my mastering studio. So I was pretty early in advertising my studio on the internet, having an own very easy to use server. You only had to register on that server, and no difficult passwords, nothing. No, I was starting to advertise my mastering worldwide, and also here in Holland. And before that, I was only focusing on Holland, because when you're a recording studio, you're not going to get clients from Russia or from England. Because I started focusing a little bit more on mastering and getting clients from all over I started getting clients from the USA, clients from England, France, Spain, all over the world. Clients were starting to use my up and download server. So, and then I thought, wow, okay, people are coming back. The clients like my work. So, and because I really wanted to leave my IT job, having already 2 kids here, so I thought, okay, this is my moment. This is the right time. I switched to mastering full time. No more recordings. I sold all my gear, my recording gear, and rebuilt this room to a mastering room. Invested in the big BMW speakers, the amplifiers, and some the Wise gear. This one I had already, and some other stuff. It was great to realize that I'm not only working for Holland, for the Netherlands, or for this small place, but my clients were all over the world. So I switched my website only to English, start promoting the website on Google AdWords, which I was one of the first guys thing to do. And you know, after 20 years working in music, I finally started making some money. And that was really great for me. So it's...
Но ты не заканчивал университет и пришел ко всему сам, полагаясь на свой слух, на свой вкус.
At that time, there were not really any schools for music education like now. Like in Holland, we have got a few modern education plans, or like SAE. There was nothing. There was only one private education. It was very expensive, and I was. It's a shame, but I worked out it all by myself. There were, especially when starting home recording, there were no forums. The internet, the internet was not there. Of course, I went to a few recording studios to do some recordings with the band. So I saw some multi-track and analog desks, etc., etc. And I just started recording myself. Put in your guitar just direct into your Porta studio and start playing. And I was lucky to have a father who was who was interested in music. He really enjoyed listening to music. So he took me to classical concerts in Amsterdam, in Utrecht. So music was a part of my education at home. My father he was a biology man. He studied, he was a professor in biology. And he trained me to use my eyes to look around and to listen. He said it's very important to develop skills so you can see good, you can listen good. We did a lot of bird watching together. So we did a lot of, so you have to look in the distance, but also listen, you know, listen what kind of bird is there. I learned it the hard way, which was a little bit, it took me a very long time. It took such a long time to become good. I would have been much better or faster if I would have interacted more early on a professional level with other engineers. I normalized them to -3. That makes, because it's important for me to know if I can raise my DAW fader by 3 dB before it hits 0. So I have 3 dB range to drive my analog change. So it's I'm using Pyramix. There's also kind of routing going on.
Сколько лет ты занимаешься мастерингом, и помнишь ли ты, на чем ты его делал, и кто был первый артист?
This one, this is the first gear I had. Yeah? This is the Millennia and NSEQ2, which is, I modified it later there's a standard modification for it. But this one was my first real analog EQ, and I had the TubeTech SMC2B, yeah, which is a multiband compressor, and everybody said, you cannot use multiband in mastering. I have no multiband anymore, but that was my combo for a long time. So the Millennia EQ and the Wise EQ also came in pretty, but and of course the L2 the L2 is still there. What is it about Armin van Buuren and Chesto? I did some projections for Solarstone, who was an English producer who was doing In the Search of Sunrise CDs of Chesto, which was pretty interesting for me. I really enjoyed trance music at that time to master it because it's a steady beat. That was very special for me, and it was because it was a foreigner. I did a lot of crazy hip hop and rap music from Amsterdam, and there were a few productions like THC and Bijlmer Style and all kinds of street hip hop from Amsterdam. They all came to here because I had that big blue compressor, you know, the TubeTech SMC2B. They all wanted to have a big punch there. And I was advertising with a lot of pictures, etc., etc. So I made some connection to the guys. And again, a lot of trance artists, even from Russia. So some really big guys now in Russia also came in from Solarstone in. I did so many productions. I'm not sure. But especially the hip-hop in Amsterdam was great. And of course, the trance music, which was really big at that time. So I really had some nice analog gear at that time. I worked on very cheap BMWs, DM3000s. I bought them secondhand for about 500 euros, but they were pretty big. They were like this with, they were nice, pretty big speakers. Of course, I used to make my own music with samplers already. I had the Akai samplers and the synthesizers. So I really enjoyed working on other people music. Let's say I want to have a digital master on this track. I have some routing going on. This is the source. I can route this to this bus. You know, I can. You see, I will put the routing off like the other track. If I click on this one, it will route to this bus, and I can monitor this bus because all the buses here, I can monitor them here. So now I'm monitoring this bus. And I can put on some standard plugins I have. This is the kind of compressor plugin with some enhancements. I have some basic EQ, set A, B, they're default. I put on some, let's say, a limiter. I think this one is 3 dB. Okay. So I just make a very quick digital master.
Ты уже много лет занимаешься мастерингом. Насколько изменилась музыка и насколько изменился подход у артистов сейчас?
I'm sure it has changed a lot. The tools have changed so much, like the whole DAWs have developed so much, and the plugins have developed so much, and the audio interfaces have developed so much. The kind of mixes you get, they have changed a lot. There are so much more tools available for producers to make the sound, instead of the early days where the mixes were pretty clean. Today you get a lot of mixes which have already color in, so that I really have seen changing over from very clean mixes where you can add a lot of saturation and colors to mixes which are already very colored, etc. So that's a big change. I've seen that change over the years. So I think the quality of mixes have raised a lot. Of course, you get mixes in which young guys of 18 or 19 years, they want to make their first rap productions. You get them in, okay. But let's say the guys who work professionally in music, I'm amazed on what people can do and make. Modern artists, which are in pop music, they're really into their own production. And I think that's a good thing. I like when artists are interested in the process. A young artist comes here and sits with me in the mastering room to learn a little bit about what's going on in the mastering room. You see an artist, they can develop like that. And if they're any kind of successful, you know, they build a team around them, they get a mix engineer, or they start going to a professional studio to do some bass recording or drums recording. And slowly they develop into a real artist who is releasing and producing all kinds of stuff. About 10, 12 years ago, it really, everybody was making an album, you know, 10 or 8 tracks. The last years, you really have, of course, focuses, there are much more attention to single tracks, you know, single production or EPs. For me, sometimes I I really enjoy when I see young artists making an album. I've seen starting out artists which they produce every year, they make an album. Later, 1 year they make an album, next year they make an album, and the other year, so they have in 3 years they make 3 albums. And they were pretty long even, like 10 tracks or 9 tracks. And after those 3 albums, they get picked up by a record label so they can start developing their live skills and their live shows. I think it's so much more presentation as an artist to make an album, because I think a single is just, everybody forgets the singles, or if people remember artists because they make an album. I think it's much more effective for an artist to bring out an album than to bring out singles and EPs. And the whole market is saying now you need more EPs because you have more exposure, and more singles, you have more exposure. But for me, I really feel make an album. Of course, you can cut up the album and make 8 singles out of it, but start with an album. I still use this one. I also can use this kind of monitoring, but let's say this will be the mix and this will be the master. So most of when I'm starting mastering, I have to make, I call it a working environment where the mix, where I can listen to the mix and the master at same levels. I'm just creating a workflow. I'm not really listening to the music. I'm just raising level, because one of the first things I do, I want to work in the destination level of the master. It doesn't make any sense just to EQ. No, I want to listen to the destination level of the project. So I'm first setting up the whole workflow levels, and then I start listening. So first time is just working up your workflow.
Ты сам проектировал эту комнату, и как ты здесь все подбирал?
Well, I think I built this room in 2007, so it's already 12 years ago. I use my common sense, and I use some forums, and I've seen, of course, studio builds on the internet, etc., and use common sense. Just put in a lot of bass traps, put in some diffusion. The walls are all floating. The walls are like double leaves, 2 slices, and there's some space gap there, and there's isolation. The floor is about this high. There's all isolation there. The walls are fully isolated. So I spend a lot of money on isolation, because I've got some neighbors here. And I try just to make it a nice open space. And it's lucky, it's about 9 meters, 8.5 meters deep. It's about 1.5 meters behind the bass straps. And one of the lucky stuff is that the bass can go out through the roof. So there's not much bass buildup. And I had some advice from, I did some drawings and put them on gear slots and said, I want to do this like this. And I had some other mastering engineers say, okay, I would put the speakers on that side and not on that side, and just use a lot of bass straps. And I had some guy in Holland, a technician who did the measurements of the room, and it was pretty okay. And I had about 2 or 3 times some more measurements going on, and I don't use any DSP on the big speakers. So it's just direct from the DA to the amplifier to the speakers. So there's no electronical room correction. I remember doing the first album in the new room. It was a pretty big album from an artist I always wanted to work for. And the room was still open. It was so scary to master in the new room and an important record. But so I think the basics was okay. The room is pretty big, so it's not much bass problem. Great speakers, great amp. And of course, I learned on the way, if the clients didn't like it, too much bass, so I learned the room in the next few years. That's how I built the room. Just looking at a lot of different rooms, looking at other mastering rooms. I went to a bigger mastering room here in the Netherlands to see, and I did it like this, and it's okay. Yeah. My analog path is pretty straightforward. First, it goes to there are no. Okay, I will disable the plugins. But in theory, it goes first to this one, to this digital EQ. Then it turns analog by this HP converter. It goes into this Millennia EQ. It goes into this Fairman compressor. And then the next one in this chain is the Fairman EQ. Then it goes digital again, and it goes to this one, to the Wise, and then it goes to this one. And then I can okay, then it's digital again, and I record this digital signal.
Я видел, ты хочешь сделать комнату в 5.1. Что ты планируешь в ней делать? Кино?
It's a very exciting moment for me because I'm going to switch the whole room around. All the speakers will go from there, will go to our camera. I'm not sure if it will be film or something like that I will be working for. There are a lot of course, gaming industry is also nice. And of course, like Netflix or all streaming services, they are also, everybody's also offering 5.1. Because I came from classical recording, maybe I want to do recording again. And I want to work with 5.1 microphones, like you have the Russian mics, Nevaton mics. Nevaton has got a nice 5.1 mic. Because I'm also a partner in a record label, I think it's nice to also to offer some of the mixes in 5.1. I think it's nice to develop some skills there. One of my main thoughts is I don't want to clip an AD converter. Of course, there's a lot of people saying about AD converters clipping for making loudness. I decided only on some kind of reggae music. Basically, I don't want to clip an AD converter a lot. So a few spots are okay if you have to make a loud master. But basically, I try to avoid any AD clipping. So there's a little bit room here. I can so I'm pushing it to the max on no clipping.
The mind is bright and heart is gone. No one love is yet to come.
Как ты относишься к пресетному мастерингу и сервисам вроде Ландера? За ними будущее?
Well, I've got a background in IT, so sometimes when I think, well, maybe I think I could do it, something like, building myself kind of Lander stuff. It would be fun to develop the skill, when somebody puts a track in a Dropbox and it gets analyzed and it gets processed and you get it back. I really don't believe in it because you can buy the plugin yourself. Why would you push it to Lander or something like that? It makes me work a little harder. I like competition. I like to be better. I like to beat them all the time. There's room for both. There's room for mastering engineers who have a track record, who take the time to listen and take care of your product in a human way. And there's stuff for guys that just want to have it loud and they don't care how it goes to Instagram and it will distort. It doesn't matter if you put on a great mastering engineer or a Lander or stuff like that.
У тебя очень много клиентов из России. Как так получилось?
For me it's fun because I went to Russia in 1987 or 85. It's like a predestination or something like that, like a circle. And I met my wife in Africa, in Kenya. And suddenly I get a lot of production also from Kenya and Africa. But yes, I'm lucky to have my Russian friends. I really feel privileged and very lucky to have such a client base in Russia. I already have a long time history with clients. I think the first serious client again was with Konstantin Matafonov. And I think I was on holiday in France and he made a call and I want you to master our next record. And I think that's more than 10 or 12 years ago. So I always put in my best effort on every project. It doesn't matter where it does come from, even if it comes from Holland or anywhere. I always put in 200% of my effort. Maybe I'm lucky. I just feel the touch of the Russian music, maybe. And of course, I went there a few times. I think I showed some interest in the work Konstantin, Nikita, Alexander Perviev. It's nice to build some kind of friendship or over time. I capture my I do a lot of limiting, but in a few different stages. I think in this case, the only permanent limiting I will do is with his wife's DS1 for making a master, which is a kind of low-level master, which is made for, which is perfect for vinyl or for distribution on YouTube normalization or on Apple Music, Spotify. So that one is pretty low, or not a loud master, but still playing with. I think sometimes you can say mastering is all about attack and release and gain staging. So I try to make some adjustments to the limiter to get a little bit better feel. And let's say I'm working in, I like to work with A-B setups.
Как ты работаешь с проблемными миксами, если там условно в них избыточный низ, либо еще что-то? Ты как-то это корректируешь здесь, либо просишь, чтобы микс-инженер это исправил у себя?
I'm not a mastering engineer who sends back a lot of mixes. Before a mix comes in my studio, I think the team has okayed the mix. I think everybody has done their best. I work with what I get, putting in all my efforts to make the mix sound better. That's my job. And I'll try to fix the problems. And I rather send back a master where the mix engineer or the team says, well, we don't like it that much. There's too much bass in it. And they said, okay, we can make a new mix. I don't have that much comment on mixes, so I think the mix job is done. Please give it to me. I will do all my best. Only when you're ready, when you finish the mastering, then you know what the problem is. It's very hard to tell the problem in, okay, if there's really too much bass, okay, but that doesn't happen that much. But too much bass, I think I can handle bass pretty okay. 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago, I sent back a mix because there was much high end there. Everything was too high, you know. The guitars were boosting high frequencies, the hi-hats were boosting the high frequencies, the synthesizers were boosting high frequencies, the vocal was boosting high frequencies, so there was such amount of high frequencies. Digital is okay in the low end, but digital is having problem with the high end. Analog is a little bit mushy in the low end, but everybody likes the high end on analog. So I see a lot of problems in the high end, and sometimes you can ask for stems, of course, do some stem mastering, and you can fix problems. But if there are really serious problems, okay, I will get back to the mix engineers and say, hey, come on, there's too much bass. But first of all, I think a mastering engineer should try to make the best master possible from the material he gets. The mix is like a glass, you know. You can put it. You can it's fun maybe to show. You make a mix. Look, okay. You throw in. This is the low end in the mix, the bass and the sub and the kick. Well, there's a lot of power there, so it can. This is a lot of low end in the mix. Then you throw in the mids, whoops, and the high mids. Okay, the low end, the mids, upper mids. This is your mix, and then you really have very little room for a lot of high end above 10, 12K. So make sure you decide which musical instrument is going to fill this high end you have in your room in your mix. Will it be the acoustic guitars, or will it be the hi-hats, or will it be the vocal? So you have to just try this low pass filter, let's say the vocal on 12K or the hi-hats on 10K, and that acoustic guitars or guitar overtones fill up the high end. And you don't have to be afraid to make a dull or boring mix, because we love to put in some great analog high end. But if you fill the glass with only, with plugins and exciters, and there will be all the spilling on the high end distortion. Okay, I'm slow. Workflow is set. I'm slowly starting to listen, and I just follow the song. I think currently I'm listening to the low end. Just try to get it optimum for this one. There's a lot of things to do. You can, of course, enjoy some high pass filter or low pass filter, some high pass filtering, but just my first intention, my first master will be just as simple as possible. Just some analog sweetness or analog stuff, little limiting. Just make it just make a simple master.
Вим, расскажи о своем проекте Workshops. Что это за проект и какова его цель?
Well, I don't do many workshops because I'm still booked a lot. I think I can work every day. I did a lot of workshops for some educational institutions here in Holland. So from that experience, I started doing some more workshops 4 or 5 or 6 times a year. I try to organize some small groups. For me, it's good to develop some kind of network or connections with musicians or studio owners. And giving workshops for me is a great opportunity to get people in and to have some discussions. It's something I want to develop a little bit more. But it's a little bit difficult here because it's in my private house, and if I have a separate building, or maybe we'll try to get a new studio in next year, and we'll move the studio out of this house. So I think giving workshops is a kind of way you get new customers. It's also good for your own training or to develop skills. Or I really like it. I really like to do it, but it's when you're busy with mastering your business and you have a family of 3 kids, it takes time to organize well. Everybody who wants to do a workshop is welcome. I had 2 extremely interesting workshops last year. With a guy from Australia came over, and from a Dutch-Canadian girl who was a classical modern composer. And of course, I did the workshop in Russia with Konstantin. 2 or 3 workshops here with individual clients. Well, everybody's welcome. I like to do it. Sometimes it's nice to switch to a different song. It's not. You have to make some pace, to it. It's better to come back later, because while mastering different songs, you start developing some kind of general sound. The first track you do, it can be spot on, but you start building a sound, when you're mastering, and you have to make some progress. And of course, in the end, you can revert to the first ones, and it's always good to make those checks, if the sound has changed over the period you're mastering. Sometimes the first one can be perfect, spot on, but while you're mastering, you're diving deeper into it and developing, you're fine-tuning it all the time a little bit better, and in the end you should have the perfect master.
С каждым годом софт приближается к железу. Скажи, на твой слух, возможно ли сделать хороший мастеринг, используя только софт, или лучше комбинировать железо и софт?
You have to consider the whole path of mastering. It's not only one piece of plugin against a compressor. Mastering is not about using a compressor. Mastering is about the whole chain from your source to from your mix to your master. And so the whole sound of a mastering is dependent by the different parts in that chain. Sometimes you can, for that path, you can choose to use only digital or plugins. I use both. I can do a master directly with plugins, and I can push it next to an analog master or a hybrid master. When a new track comes in, I just set up a digital master very quickly, about 10 or 5 minutes. And this will be digital. And then I try to push it analog. And even on some productions, the digital version can sound more punchy, more clear, less distortion. And again, it's not the software or it's not the hardware, it's the guy driving the hardware. It's about the engineer who works with it, and it doesn't matter if it's a digital tool or analog tool. I think the engineer is responsible for making something sound great. Of course, if you have great tools, it's a little bit more easy than if you have insufficient or mediocre gear. It will be difficult to achieve a kind of result you want to hear as a mastering engineer. Sometimes it can be digital, or in most cases, I still some analog has some advantages, but maybe because I'm used to it, I know to get the result very quickly. That's why I don't have that much gear anymore. I think you better can have 1 or 2 good pieces, analog gear, than about 6 or 7 mediocre stuff. And I think still analog can sound better as digital, but you have to work hard. It's not an easy job to make it sound great. For me, working with digital is much more easy, faster. And sometimes you really have to work hard with your analog gear to beat the digital sound. But I think this compressor still sounds better as any plugin. But okay. And an analog EQ is nice, but it's not like one plugin. It's the whole chain, you know. It's going from your digital into your analog chain. You have to check it out. You have to check if digital is interesting for a production. It depends on the project, Sasha, which is better or not. It's a preference of an engineer, the experience, used to it, you know, getting result. Sometimes analog is faster, sometimes digital is faster. You know, as a mastering engineer these days, you have to know both worlds to get the best out of digital and get the best out of analog, and then decide, okay, this fits the project. If I have a new client or a new I try to send two masters on one track. I like to do the final limiting the next day, because after working 4 or 5 hours very intense on these tracks, I'm too tired. I cannot judge anymore. I like to separate the final limiting to the next day and see it really as a different process, not as this flow where I try to capture the best possible master on a very decent level. But if we want to push it loud, I really like to do that differently next day or something like that.
Расскажи, с чего ты начинаешь работу над песней и на что обращаешь внимание?
A new song is always a treat for a mastering engineer, because you're getting in something from the internet, you put it in your DAW, you start listening. It's something totally new you never heard before. The mix engineer, he's looking with a microscope, you know, he's looking in every detail, zooming in, okay, a little bit sharp. Okay, this is the bass, this is this. I just like to enjoy the music first. I don't watch into a microscope, I just watch it through a glass of whiskey or something like that. You know? I think a lot of details are escaping me. I just like to feel, okay, what kind of energy is there? What's going on there? What kind of song is this? Sometimes I had a mix guy, an artist sitting next to me here, where you were sitting, Sasha, and I saw he was getting depressed, because, and I started to worry, okay, what am I doing wrong? And he said, well, I don't like that piano in the right speaker. You know, that piano, it's terrible, you know? It was, for me, I did not hear any piano in that song, but the mixer, he was so focused on. So maybe you say, come on, forget about the piano, it's not important. Of course it's important, but for me as first listener, I did not know it was such a, it was not there at all. And after that, okay, I dive in more, I let the process of mastering let me listen to the different details where I have to listen for. You know, what can I do with the low end? What can I do with the vocal? Is the vocal loud or not? Or where can I clean up? Or I bound from, okay, fixing low end, okay, then I have to fix, things will change in the high end. It's you're building this is the mix, and you start building the master. You add compression, it's something happening, so you have to fix the high end. And it's a permanent process of listening. It's like working 10-15 minutes, then I'll just move out or do something different, and then focus again on listening. It's really an enjoyable process of listening and changing, listening, changing, listening, changing. And you can use the same gear or the same EQs or the same compressors, but the way you listen, that's really different, I think.
Hands and let it settle, the Russian's not even into it. Your accent suck, your English bad. Your rhymes are cheap, I'm still like I made myself believe in a dream. The dream's like a drug, the dream I'm living.
С чем тебе интереснее работать? С обычным мастерингом или со стем-мастерингом? И как ты справляешься с тем, что во время стем-мастеринга ты можешь немного разрушить задумку артиста либо продюсера?
If you do a lot of just normal stereo two-track masters, of course you long for, please give me another, I want to do some stem mastering again. But if you do a lot of stem mastering, you say, okay, come on, please give me just normal two-track masters. When I do stem masters, I always ask for, please send me also just for check the normal mix. I need to know what the intentions are of the song. So I want to have the stem masters, which are an exact copy of the mix. So I have a 0.0 where I can start working. I don't do that much stem mastering, but every year there are a few projects which are nice to do. Of course, I like Pyramix, which is pretty great in stem mastering. I will be very conservative when using stem mastering, but there are some really nice options. In a mastering studio, you better can judge the stage of the song, while mixing engineers have maybe a little bit more information on the details of the mix. And we in the mastering studio, you can very nicely judge the stereo field and what's happening in the mid. So that's the nice of stem mastering. You can say, okay, I will push something more to the side. I will put the vocal more center. You have some more, and the ability to have some level. Also, let's say I can put the bass or the kick louder or the vocal louder or etc. But the most fun for me is personally playing with the field of the stereo image. Of course, I think producers or mixers should allow some kind of change on a stem master. Otherwise, they would not send a stem master, I think. But we stay so close to the original mix. I think it's more a kind of detail, or just present the song as best as possible, and you have some more control on how it's presented. You know, it's a nice tool, but I think it's. Please don't send me 36 stems or 40 stems like some Italian producers did in the past. You know, they sent 40 stems. But if you send, let's say, 4 stems or 5 stems or maybe 6, then I really like to do it once in a while.
Чаще всего просят делать громкий мастер, но при этом микс сжимается. И как искать в этом случае компромисс?
I don't mind doing loud masters. And I don't mind doing very hi-fi or very high resolution kind of masters. It's a difficult time we live in for a mastering engineer or for a music producer or even I think for an artist. It's an amazing difficult because you have so many kinds of ways to present music, so many media for music. You know, in the early days it was only a vinyl record was the only way to sell your music or or radio, live radio, etc. But these days you have so many different platforms like we have Spotify, we have Apple Music now. It's so many. You have vinyl records, you have high resolution audio, you just have radio, you have TV, you have YouTube, etc., etc. Amazing loud masters. They sound great on YouTube. They sound great on Apple Music. I still advise young bands or making their first album. I have some discussion with them. I say, come on, if it's your first album, so you don't want to have. If they play you on Tool on Apple Music and loudness balancing is off, you know, you don't want to have the first album of a young band dropping about 6 dBs against Tool or so. So you know, it's almost impossible for a young band to make a decision. Okay, let's go for a hi-fi album, because they want to be commercial sounding the same way as Tool or etc. etc. So I understand why a young band or a young hip-hop guy, they want to have the same, or EDM guy, have the same loudness as the peers or the majors in the industry. So it's perfectly, it's just the way it goes these days. So they are forced to make loud records. Yeah. And I'm there to help to make loud records for them. So and that's a good thing, making great live shows. That's more important for them. They don't sometimes, okay, let's go, it's a rough saying, we don't care about a record, it just has to sound loud and we have to sell it. But we care about our live shows, which is much more important for us. But I had also an artist which has done his 4th album already, it's number 4, 6th album. And he was wanting a loud record. I could talk to him and say, you don't need a loud record anymore because people know you, they know what kind of music you make. And I could, okay, come on, let's make a little bit, don't slam it to -5 RMS or -6 LFO. Just take it down to -8 or -9. If you're a seasoned artist with number 5, 6 albums, you don't have to go that loud anymore. But a young band doing hip-hop, EDM, they're forced to make loud records. I really like her vocals, so I should try to get a little bit more sexy on her vocal or just some more. The mix is great, so it's sometimes great mixes are pretty hard to master because you really have to be gentle or to just work your way around it.
Есть ли какой-то лайфхак, чтобы свести трек так, чтобы у него был большой потенциал для мастеринга?
If you want to make a great mix for the best master, you have to make a mix and not make a finished product. You have to make a mix sound like a mix, and a mix doesn't sound like a master. Eh? If you want to make a great master on hip-hop, just put on your snare, let's say, put your snare 2 dB up, put your vocal 2 dB up, and put your hi-hats 2 dB up, because then we can crush it, and then you still will have a very loud sounding. Don't try to make your mix sound like a finished product. There can be some more dynamic. It can be a little bit more raw. Don't try to polish it. It can be a little bit more aggressive mix as a finished master, which is more regular, but your mix can have bigger contrast. If you make your mix very nice, like this, you will have a master which is like this. But if you make mix a little bit more dynamic, you can have also a bigger dynamic range in your master. You have to think about eternal life and a lot about sex if you're working with music. Yeah, you have to just enjoy. Like modern paintings, you have to not like this. I think a mix has to be like that. Huh? Big Russian drama, dynamics, or it has to be a dynamic painting, Sometimes you have mixes which are mixed to death, You have to develop some kind of working relationship with a mastering engineer, and then maybe one mastering engineer likes to have a little bit more this or more that. It's nice to build a relationship so you can make better mixes because you know your mastering engineer. And you have to build a relationship professionally with if you're a producer and you want to have a great bass player, or you want to find a great string quartet, or you want to find a perfect guitarist. You have to build good relationships with musicians, and then you can make great products or great music, great productions.
Вим, дай несколько советов начинающим мастеринг- и микс-инженерам, на что им стоит обращать внимание в своей работе и как повышать свой уровень.
It's a long way, I think, to become a good mastering engineer or a good mix engineer. You have to start. Always start and see what will happen. And be sure there are some young mix guys who make it in 2 or 3 or 4 years because they are so amazingly talented. Music, it should give back some energy. Otherwise, you won't survive for 10 or 15 years, Even if you don't make any money 10 or 15 years, you should still, if you enjoy it, if it's really something you enjoy doing, then it's very rewarding, If you want to work, try to get some good gear, Because working with great gear or riding a great racing bike or having a nice Italian motorbike, you should enjoy working the gear you have. If you want to succeed, put in all you have to live the life dangerously. You have to put in all your money. I did it for 20 years. For me, it was always living on the edge. There was no money, never. All the money went into gear. If you want some results, you should put in all your energy. If you don't invest, there will nothing happen. I used to make my own music, and I'm now a mastering engineer. I think you should never give up songwriting, playing your instrument. I think it's important to make music yourself. Finally, you will go somewhere. The road, droga will take you, something like that. if you want to be, let's say, if you want to be a mastering engineer, you have to focus on one particular piece of the production very deeply. If you want to be a songwriter, finally you have to dig deep into songwriting. You cannot be a mix engineer and a great songwriter and a great mastering engineer, etc. But you have to play, you have to do all the cooking. Someday you will focus. It will come maybe strange or but put in all your time and your effort and your money, or be lucky. But there's only 1% is lucky in life. I always put in a lot of energy, 12 hours a day, 20 years long or something like that. And then it's still a hard business. It's still a hard business, but it's very enjoyable. You know, everybody will be lucky in his life at least one time. And maybe two. I hope so. I was lucky once, you know. But you have to be prepared to take the chance, and just in the meanwhile, while you wait on to get lucky, you have to work.
Be in my music all alone.